So I'm going to be talking about fracturing with trauma and programming in Mkultra style abuse, occult, satanic ritual abuse, etc. And to start with that, we need to go over how the brain kind of works. So I'm going to illustrate by this little brain that I'm going to draw. And then with the blue, I'm using that to represent the mind, kind of like the brain's a computer, mind is the software, mind is the us. And together, it's like a computer. So with the mind, we have our conscious and subconscious, and they play different parts. So with the subconscious, we're not fully aware of what goes on. That's the part of our mind that isn't really paying attention to everything that's going on around us. It does influence our thoughts and feelings, but it's buried, so it's not readily accessible to us. And our conscious is aware. It's like our, things we're aware of. It's on the surface. Subconscious is below the surface, like in the background. So with satanic ritual abuse and Mkultra, behavior modification, etc., with fracturing, I draw a little angry dude there. The perpetrators, handlers, programmers, whatever you want to call them, they perform severe, extreme trauma in order to fracture a person's mind. It's often repeated, structured, methodical. They know what they're doing. And what happens during extreme trauma, repeated trauma, something like that, your mind can't handle it. It's too much. Hanging on to this would just make you go insane. So in order to handle it, our brains fracture. It's a protection mechanism. And it's like a mirror that shatters into different shards, different pieces. But all those pieces are part of the original whole. So it's not that they are added, they're made, they're created. And this can be, depending on what's going on, depending on the programmers, depending on who's doing it. It can be, a single part, it can be multiple parts. And again, these parts are all coming from the original whole mind. They're all parts of one. And these are the parts or pieces that can be programmed, brainwashed, controlled. They're like blank slates, but not usually blank. And those are what people refer to as alters. They can be formed into personalities. Often, the moment the trauma happens, those alters or parts are kind of trapped in time, usually at the age the trauma happened. They can be fractured off. Those parts can contain the memories, they can contain the emotions, they can contain knowledge that they only remember when they come up, which I'll kind of go into a little bit. And then with the creation of parts, that creates a system. And then I kind of did a little illustration here, and I'll go over it. So when you create parts or a system of parts, again, because the brain is like a computer, and these people know that our brains act this way and behave this way, so this is possible. So programmers, the cults, etc., they create a personality off the original, off of this fractured part of the original mind. And then if you want to think of it as like, and this is actually something that is used, so be just careful, anyone who has been through this, they do use carousel programming. So a carousel, imagine it like a carousel, and every little seed or animal, whatever, what have you, on the carousel has a part, a fractured off part. And, you know, this isn't hyper specific. It doesn't have to be like this. It's just for illustrative purposes. And then, so they have these personalities, these individual parts of the mind kind of made into their own identities, own programs. You can think of it like different operating systems on a computer that helps you. And these parts can be called up by the programmer, handler, etc., the cult, via codes, colors, sounds, visual cues, etc., to the front of the mind. So the one that is in front, in the conscious, like pulling them up from the subconscious or the system, and then they create amnesic barriers. And they do this, they put in the amnesic barriers so that the alters are not usually aware of each other, and they don't remember the others existing. And these alters have different purposes, like in that little slide. So why do they do it? Right? That's like a big question. So the amnesic personality can be programmed to do anything. Like in the previous slide, they can be, you know, an alter can be the tattletale, self-reporter. So the handler can call up that alter to tell them everything, essentially tattle on the person or explain what had happened. And these types of alters are usually heavily programmed via behavior modification, where they are heavily praised and rewarded for telling, and also very aware of the punishment that would ensue if they didn't, or if they lied. So it's a huge benefit to these programmers because they want to know everything that's going on at all times. This is where behavior modification comes into play. If you know anything about training a dog or anything, you give them a treat when they do what you want, positive reinforcement. And, you know, they can create an, you know, trigger warning for this one, like an alter who is trained to be sexual with adults, who is comfortable with that, you know, anything like that. So with repression, thunder outside. Repression, it can be built in, you know, like part of the system, part of the programming. People are made to forget using a code, phrase, drug, signal, sight, sound, etc. It can be automatic. This happens with trauma in general, you know, so severe or traumatic. It would drive one insane, or it's just too much in general, whatever it is. So the mind pushes it down into the subconscious, and the trauma is also stored in the body. It can be instant or not instant. And then when we're talking about repressed memories and what they're like or how they are repressed, it can be many different ways depending on the person. So when a memory is repressed, it's not always repressed cleanly. Like, it's not just a memory with the emotions, physical feelings, or context all together in a nice little bubble. It's not usually like that. It can be, but usually it's kind of disjointed. It can, the part or alter that is fractured off can hold all of those things, but not necessarily, someone doesn't necessarily experience them all at once. Sometimes they're disjointed. It's kind of, can be all different things. It can be the memory is repressed with all emotions or context. It can be a memory of emotions and surrounding events. It can be any combo of things.